right, welcome to the Time for Success podcast with your host, Matt Barbey, the founder of Time for Success. And this is the podcast for business owners who really want to be able to take their businesses to that next level where they have freedom back in their lives. They've got more options with how they run their business, with how they run their lives. They're able to not be a slave to their business anymore and be able to really just sit back and let their teams do what they've trained them to do and let the business grow and thrive without the daily hassles. And one of those major sticking points for a lot of business owners is math. A lot of business owners, they just don't love the math. They don't love the numbers, whether they are okay with numbers and they just find the math of their business a little bit anxiety inducing, or they just hate numbers, period. It is critical if you really want to be able to have a thriving, growing business to understand what numbers you need to know and what to do about them. And to that point, I've got a couple of great friends and strategic partners for my business and my clients as well, people that I highly trust and highly recommend. The team from Innovative Business Advisors, we've got Terry Lammers and we've got Stephen Denny. How are you guys doing today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having us on.
Good. Thank you for being on. Well, before we get into all the funny math and number stuff of business, can you tell the group that's listening here today what it is that you do at Innovative Business Advisors? Terry?
I can jump in on that, I guess. We basically do three things. We help people buy and sell companies. Our target client typically has a value. The business has a value between 1 and 20 million. I'm a CVA, a certified valuation analyst. So Steve and I do a lot of business valuations, and we also have a coaching program to the company. It's called CEO to CEO, so Chief Everything Officer to Chief Executive Officer. So it keeps us busy.
I love it. Yeah. How did you two guys meet? Like, what brought you guys together? I'm just curious.
I'll let Steve take that
one. Terry says we dated for a year before we got hitched, but we were in a mastermind group together. We had the same mentor and coach. Used to talk about our businesses. He and I both had virtually identical businesses on different sides of the river. So we'd go to these mastermind meetings once a month, and we'd be talking about our businesses, and we had similar issues that we were contending with. We elected to do some joint advertising and kind of some joint ventures together. And, after doing that for a period of time, we just said, hey, it doesn't make sense that we're both having the same kind of fixed overheads in the business. Why don't we combine forces and see if we can make 1 + 1 = more than 2? And I think we're more than 2 years in it, and I think we've proven that the model is successful.
2 years is definitely a good testing time. So if you guys haven't found a sticking point where you guys just can't get over it quite yet, that's a pretty good mark. That's pretty good.
Steve's a very detail-oriented person, and I'm kind of more of a big picture person, and the two seem to get along very well.
Yeah, that balance is key. As long as you guys can see that, and do you guys partnerships can be tough. First of all, like before we get into that, what would you say is the key to success for a good partnership that you guys have seen?
Well, I think the old adage is the partnership is a hard ship to sail is absolutely true. But I think we haven't done everything right. But I think the one thing that we did pretty well is we went through initially a pretty detailed set of operating agreements, and we spent some one-on-one FaceTime together, going through the agreements together and making sure that we were establishing a foundation. And we don't always see eye to eye, but I think by and large we haven't hit anything yet that's become a sticking point for us.
So now it's interesting. You guys started off as business brokers, right? Is that really kind of where you guys formed together, came together, and started working together as business brokers, right? And then how did the CEO to CEO program evolve?
It's kind of interesting. For one, we're trying to practice what we preach. The brokerage business is a very transactional business. So you sell a company, you got to go find another company to sell. Valuation is not quite as bad, but pretty much you value a company, the valuation is done, and you got to go find another company to value. companies that have recurring revenue in them will typically sell for a higher multiple than transactional companies. So it's kind of funny how this all fell together. We both subscribe to the value builder system, which is non-financial things that can affect the value or sellability of a company. So we had that piece. From my background with owning a previous company, I had a method of putting my financial data into an income trend and a month-to-month income trend, and then doing the same thing with a balance sheet and then creating a ratio analysis page. And, and that's what's part of our program is we're keep teaching, how to look at that financial information in a trend, and then a ratio analysis page that you're looking at 8 or 10 ratios that will teach you. And if you know those, you'll have a pretty good pulse on your company. Steve came and he used to actually travel all around the country doing a profit improvement plan. And Steve, I'll let you talk about that since that's your piece.
Yeah, it was very similar. So that actually started with the same income trend process that Terry was using, and basically showing business owners how the dollar moves through their business by following it through their business reports, the operating statements, profit and loss statements, if you will, balance sheets, and cash flow statements. And I used to focus my clients on really understanding that whole process. And when I saw Terry's forms, I was like, oh, I used to do something similar to that as well. So we pulled out my old process and we married, what Terry was doing with what I was doing. And then that's 90% of the story, if you will. The other part that's important is giving business owners a framework by which they can make strategic decisions that grow the value of their company. So, knowing your numbers is one thing. We think it's the first thing and the most important thing. And that's why our coaching program, the first 12 months of going through CEO to CEO, really teaches the business owners how to get their numbers down cold. And at the end of those 12 months, they come out of that with exactly that. They know their numbers like the back of their hand. Then we expand on that by teaching them the other 6 factors that can have a dramatic influence on the overall value of your business. And it's all about creating a strategic mindset whereby when a business owner is running their business day to day, knowing those factors and knowing what, positive side and a negative side of that is, helps them make a decision about should I do this or should I do that as they're, moving forward in their business every day. So we want them to know their numbers, to really understand how bankable they are and be able to use their bankability as the rocket fuel to propel their business moving forward. And then we want them to understand how value is really derived in the business so that, at the end of the day, they're growing the value in their company and not making strategic decisions that would harm or impair the value of their company just because they don't know.
Now, that all sounds really complicated, but I think we do a really good job in putting it into a format that it's easy. So if you're listening and you're out there and like, oh my God, I hate financial statements, we'll have fun. We have fun doing it, and we break it down to where it's very simple.
So it all sounds very complicated, and that's one of why it does, and for a lot of business owners, they're so stuck in the day-to-day. And they're just trying to make sure that the clients are being serviced, that they're bringing more business in through the door, that the little fires between team members are being put out, and everybody's being able to work together on a daily basis. How critical is it for a business owner to really understand their numbers for them to be able to run their business more profitably?
It's absolutely critical, and I think Steve. I failed to mention that a big piece of our CEO program is teaching you your bankability. Likely, if you're going to have to expand your business, you're going to have to borrow money. People get very frustrated with bankers, and it seems like there's that old mentality of, my banker's a good guy, or, he's taking care of me, and it's all about relationship and not about financials. Well, it's all about the numbers, and the bank's held accountable by federal regulators. And as soon as you can understand those numbers, and it's not rocket science, you should be able to go to your bank knowing that you have a bankable deal on the table. In my previous company, with the acquisitions that I did, once I got to the part where I was a bankable person and I knew it, the company took off like wildfire. I mean, we was buying one company a year.
So you think that a big part of this is about bankability. So being able to go to the bank confidently, knowing that you are somebody that the bank wants to work with, and knowing confidently that they're going to give you a loan to be able to fund buying new equipment, fund maybe
Buy another
payroll,
company.
buy another company. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. How long should people? How far before, I should say, like people are exit planning? Let's say like somebody maybe thinking about selling their business in the future. How far before that actual transaction should people start understanding their numbers and maybe be looking into like a program like yours where they understand their profit and loss statements, their banking statements, all that?
So let me say it's the most critical thing that a business owner has to do. And it's uniquely the business owner's responsibility for the business. Okay. Nobody else in the business has that responsibility, Matt. So knowing your numbers is the most important thing that a business owner can do. Mm-hmm. And, we always say typically the business owners we met, they're technical experts in whatever business they have. So, if they're in the car business, they might know everything in the world about cars, but they rarely know everything in the world about the numbers of their business. And so we tell the business owners the most important thing you do is know your numbers. And when you know your numbers down cold, then then we can easily teach you what banks and everybody else is looking for. That's the bankability process, right? So when you know your numbers, you know how you can then judge the health of your company and the bankability of your company. And when you walk into that banker and you know your numbers down cold and you know exactly where you stand, it gives you 100% confidence about what you're presenting. And those are the people that are hard to resist, and banks don't resist them. Those are the people that banks are actually looking to help because it gives them confidence. Bank wants to get repaid. They provide you the money, which is just like, the other supplies you need for your business to grow your business. And all they want to do is make sure they can get repaid. And if you have got 100% confidence and can demonstrate it through your numbers, you'll have all the money you need.
Yeah. I agree. The business owners need to have clarity into what's going on in their business. And that's one of the things that I talk to my clients about first thing is that if you don't at least understand some of the basics about the numbers, about what's happening day to day in your business, about whether or not even a product or service that you're offering is even somewhat profitable at the very least. And how are you managing that cash flow? How do they know what's going to be in the bank account next week?
I think that's what part of the program is about. It's to stop the process of the owner being a checkbook manager, basically managing the checkbook and judging what am I going to do next by how much money's in the checkbook. It's very interesting. The business that I had before required a ton of working capital, so we had a lot of, large accounts receivable, and we had to pay our payables before we received our receivables. So, you get into that, and I can show you a very real scenario where a business can go broke, not because it was unprofitable, but because they purely ran out of cash. And that's very real. If you don't know how to manage that, gosh, for years I struggled. It's like, wow, how can my financial statement say that I'm making a ton of money, but there's never any money in the checkbook,
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
once you figure it out, it's humbling.
And that's the biggest issue. That's the biggest issue, Matt, for contractors in particular. They simply run out of cash, right? Because they don't know how to balance their working capital requirements of their business. They don't know how to balance the time period between when they're able to bill somebody for something and actually receive payment, and when they have to pay for the things that they need to do the job.
And the sad part is, we're also about building a team of people around you, so who's your banker, who's your CPA or bookkeeper? And what's sad is a lot of times when these companies are going through growth spurts and they're experiencing these pains, they don't have the correct team members around them to help them through the process. I went for years with a standard line of credit. Your credit limit's $200,000. Boom, blow through it. Big ordeal. Get it up to 3. Finally, they put me on a borrowing base certificate, which basically gives you no limit to your credit limit, and you're borrowing a percentage, like 75% of your accounts receivable and 50% of your inventory. Well, once I got put on that, I could grow exponentially, and I just had to stay in these parameters instead of having a set number. It's little things like that that just make a huge difference. And, it's frustrating that why didn't my banker suggest that, 3 or 4 years earlier? Why didn't my CPA bring it up?
Yeah. So one of the struggles that I see very frequently is that, for a small business owner, they, let's put it this way. I have a friend of mine who was telling me about a project that they were working on with a team member, and he told that team member to put together a budget with the client that they were working with. And she came back to him and said, I don't know how to build a budget. Well, she had run a business for a number of years, and he just couldn't understand how this person had never created a budget and didn't know how to. And I said to my friend, I said, you know how most small business owners pay the bills, right? He said, well, what do you mean? Isn't it based on, what they've got budgeted and what they know they've got coming in and going out? I said, well, a lot of the times small business owners, they look at the bank account, if they're kind of at least looking ahead a little bit, to see if there's enough money to pay the bill that they've got in their hand at that moment. And if not, they wait until there's enough money in the bank account. Some of them just write the check and hope that there's going to be enough money coming through to be able to take care of it. So it's unfortunate that we really don't actually have in our education system any good education around even running our own budgets, much less a business budget. We don't really understand what cash flow means. Let's actually just take a step back. What does cash flow even mean, guys?
It's how the cash flows through the company. So the biggest thing you got to think of, and it's funny, I keep going back to my previous business, but I can remember sitting at my desk thinking about this. Is the bank looking at net income, or are they looking at, because it's getting taught this cash flow thing where you're adding back depreciation and amortization, which are non-cash expenses? If you're getting the EBITDA and you're adding back interest and a couple other things, but for the main thing to get to the cash flow, you're adding back depreciation and amortization. So I always looked at my income statement. I'm like, no, if it wasn't for that dang depreciation guy, I'd be making a lot of money. But it was always in the back of my mind. What is the bank looking at? So it was, and once I sold the company and I actually worked for a bank, guess what? They're looking at the cash flow of the company. Net income doesn't mean anything. That's one of my biggest mantras, is why I always say it's not about sales and net income. It's about gross profit and cash flow. So knowing that cash flow, that's what you're looking for. Yeah, and especially in this era of bonus depreciation, where you can depreciate off up to $250,000 at one whack. I think that's what the number is. That's really going to kill your net income. But the only thing you're really looking at for an income is that's your taxable income. But the bank is going to add back that into your net income and come up with the cash flow of the company.
So what is the difference between looking at your cash flow statement versus your profit and loss statement? Which one is more important on a day-by-day basis?
Well, generally, you don't look at either of them day by day. But I think what Terry just mentioned earlier, one thing you should look at is gross profit every day. So if you understand your costs, right, and you understand that you're generating enough gross profit to cover your costs, then you know that you should be accumulating cash in your business. Then it's important to take a look at the difference between when you have to pay for things and when you actually collect from your customers. So, a restaurant where you're putting a check on the table after you serve them and your customer's paying for that before they walk out the door, generally restaurants can operate with almost zero working capital requirements, because they may not have to pay the egg supplier and the produce supplier for a week. But when the customer comes in, they get paid every single day from the customers. So they have this accumulating cash flow that tends to happen, right? In Terry's old business, where you're in the fuel business, where you're buying a bunch of fuel and then you're having to deliver the fuel and then get paid later, or any business where you have to send somebody an invoice to get paid later, very often those companies are paying their suppliers for the product up front before their customers are writing them a check for what they've sold. So that's when you got to have working capital in the business. And what happens is, particularly for contractors, they take on more and more work because they think that higher sales is going to mean higher profits, which might be true for them. But the problem is they outrun their working capital. Their suppliers are not opposed to supplying them until they stop getting paid. And the reason they stop getting paid is because the contractor can't collect fast enough from their clients to meet their supplier requirements. That's called running out of cash in your business, and that's the number one reason that businesses fail. That's the number one reason small businesses fail.
Yeah, I know of quite a few examples of companies that are doing millions of dollars a year in business, and they've got millions of dollars in contracts. They're just stacked up on the table waiting to be executed on. But they've had to shut down because they did not have the capital to be able to run on a day-by-day basis.
Yeah.
So in the CEO program, 3 of the ratios that we teach people is accounts receivable days, inventory days, and accounts payable days. So what that means is accounts receivable days, that's how many days is it taking to collect my cash once I've sold it. Accounts payable days is how many days from the time I receive an invoice on average do I have to pay my bill. And inventory days is, how many days worth of inventory do I have? Then we also track daily sales. So if your inventory days, let's just say you're selling $10,000 worth of stuff a day, and these numbers vary a little bit, but if your inventory days go up by 5, that's $50,000 more worth of inventory that you have around than if you would have lowered it. Or, in my case, before I sold the company, we was at $250,000 a day in sales. So if my inventory days, if my accounts receivable days went up by 2, so I'm not receiving my money as fast, and my accounts payable days went down by 2, meaning I'm paying my bills faster, that's 4 days, that's $1 million. There's $1 million of cash that just disappeared. It doesn't have nothing to do with your profitability. And it doesn't matter if you're selling $250,000 a day or $2,500 of stuff a day. If you don't have the cash, that's a pain point. So by watching those numbers, you can really pay attention to how much cash is coming in and out of your, out of your business. I had a client recently that needed $100,000 to open up a 3rd location. And I had been on them all the time that you're paying your bills too fast. Their accounts payable days were like 5. So, they're getting an invoice, boom, 5 days later, they're writing a check. You could at least get 25 days, couldn't you? Well, their case was their daily sales were just right at $10,000 a day. So, what I showed them was, let's let those payable days go from 5 to 15 or 20, and you're going to have $150,000 back in the checkbook. You don't need to borrow the money to open that 3rd location.
Yeah. So, well, that's just knowing how much you have in the bank is a struggle for a lot of business owners, though. They don't know when the money's coming out. They don't know when the money's coming in. Right.
Well, you don't know what they don't know.
Right. Terry also has a book, right? Quick plug for the book.
Quick plug for the book. You don't know what you don't know. www.youdon'tknowwhatyoudon'tknow.com.
I've seen it a lot with a lot of my clients and trying to get them to better understand that, whenever they have these contracts that are 30, 45, 60, 120 days until they get paid, they don't necessarily always connect the dots. And I get it because, again, we have terrible financial education in the school systems. And most of the time, where do you go to get it? Well, you go to YouTube. You can't always trust what's on YouTube, right? But I get the struggle that for a lot of business owners, they don't necessarily always connect the dots between having to pay the payroll today and the other costs related to just getting a job done versus when that money is coming in. And they don't necessarily understand even that the gross profitability. I work with my clients very early on understanding the gross profitability of their services. And the gross profits is, a lot of people get that confused with net profits and wait, where do my fixed costs come in, and where does it all fall? So
one of the things that was brilliant about what Steve brought to the table, believe it or not, so I've gone all these years using my plan, and it's just so interesting. Steve comes with this, literally dust off this profit improvement plan that he's taught for years. And he taught me a bunch of things. And what's really interesting about adding Steve's profit improvement plan to our CEO piece is that it breaks things down in percentages. So oftentimes what can even get more confusing for a business owner is I'm growing my business, I'm growing my business, I'm growing my business. I want more sales, right? Well, without them knowing it, their gross profit margins are going down. So they're not extracting as much cash from that sale, but then their accounts receivable days and payable and those ratios are getting out of whack because as they're growing the business, they're not, you don't know. I just know my accounts receivable went from 100,000 to 200,000, and I don't know how many days I have there. I just know my accounts payable is up to 250,000 from 100,000, but how many days does that make sense? And what's really nice where we break it down into those percentages, you can almost make the argument that I'm going to manage my business by the percentages more so than I am by the numbers, because if I got my percentages right, the numbers are going to be right. And then Steve's got a great way of taking where my way was to put it into a month by month trends. We put it into a year trend and then pick those best percentages. And, that's kind of a little bit of the secret how we're coming up with a profit improvement plan. But then that also becomes your budget. You talk about not being able to make a budget. We'll show you how, and your budget's going to be performance markers that your company has achieved at one point in time or another. Is that accurate, Steve?
Yeah. So Matt, the big thing is most business owners, I think the biggest myth in business is if I raise sales, my profit's going to go up. And most business owners, follow that myth. They think all I got to do is raise sales a little bit more and my profit will go up substantially. The problem with that is that most business owners will discount their products in order to raise sales. And when you're discounting your products, very often they'll discount them more than, the gross, than what the business can actually sustain. So the gross profit is going down, which means they don't have enough gross profit in their business to cover all their costs, and their profits, their actual business profits, go down commensurate with the business. So we teach them how to pay attention to all those things. What are the key numbers to watch for? And understanding those numbers on a weekly basis becomes very easy for clients to go through this process. And then they're able to actually see the profits grow in their business, because once they understand what the key numbers are that they need to watch, it's easy to do, and they almost gamify it. And so we teach them, what the potential resides in their business. And if you got a business owner, so I had a business owner for 35 years that was running a business, basically a break even for 35 years. After going through the program, I told him, your business should be producing net profits of $500,000 a year, right? He didn't believe me. It was too big of a jump from what he had experienced. So I actually taught him how to do the CEO to CEO process over a short period of time. And at the end of the first year, his profits were halfway there. At the end of the second year, he actually achieved $500,000 in gross profit, in net profit. And he never made that much money in the prior 35 years of running his business.
Yeah. It's life-changing when people can finally get the profits that they've always wanted to have, finally get the money into the bank account that they know that they're capable of. And it's sad that they don't really understand why that doesn't happen. But just to your point, a quick example of a roofing company that I know, he was cutting deals, making more sales than he ever had before, but he couldn't understand why at the end of the month the bank account was in the negative. And by working through these numbers and by understanding that actually he was actually underbidding, and each time he made a sale, he was actually basically paying these customers to be able to work with them. So it basically changed how he viewed the sales and how he managed his teams, how he managed his budget. I want to go back to this concept, though, of the CEO to CEO. So why did you choose that name?
Because really, most business owners are the chief everything officer. They think they have to do everything. And really, the one thing they're not doing is really understanding their numbers and how their business flows, right? So when we teach them the numbers and they really understand it, and teach them how to strategically think about their business, it really frees them up to see that, you know what, my job is really to be the captain of the ship. I don't have to be the guy that's always, pulling the sails up and adjusting the anchor lines and everything else. I got people around me that can do some of that stuff. I just got to effectively tell them what they need to do to get it done, right? Yeah. But the captain's got to start by learning what their job is and making sure they do their job first. And that's what becoming a chief executive officer is all about. Truly being the executive in your business and being able to direct the activities of others in your business.
Yeah. And what's powerful is on our flyer, there's a quote from Amy. And Amy was a valuation client of mine. And when I valued her company, she was really, she was upset with me because she thought the company was worth a lot more. So fast forward, she calls me a year later and asked if I'd come meet with her. And, she expressed to me that she was upset with the last valuation. It was obvious. So I'm like, yes, I understand that. But she said, I took a lot of things you said to heart. And she did. She made a lot of changes. But at the end of the interview or, our meeting, she said, I have some questions. And this is pay attention. And this is what's powerful about the CEO program. She goes, well, how much profit should I show? Should I run my net income down to zero, or should I show, a big profit, but then my accountant says I'm going to have to pay taxes? So if you're a CPA on the line, this is where me and Steve get a little growly with CPAs. What's their job? They don't want you to pay any taxes. So Willie's running your net income down to nothing. But what you're going to get when you're the chief executive is you're going to know, do I need to be a bankable person? So, if I have to show profit and great margins, so I'm a bankable person, you're going to have to show a net income and you're going to have to pay taxes. If you're in a position, it's like, I don't need to borrow money, I got all the money I want. Well, then let's look at it from a tax perspective.
Terry and I have this big disagreement with CPAs. So CPAs are generally telling business owners to minimize their net income, right, to avoid paying taxes. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do if your goal is to exit your business in the next few years. Okay, so everything's got to be done in context. And I think Terry's point earlier that it's all about having the right people around you at the right time. So, it's if you want to grow the value of your business, you don't grow the value of your business by showing no profits year after year after year. And there are things like that you need to pay close attention to if your goal is really to build something that one day you can sell or hand off to somebody else and have, significant value for, and potentially even fund your own retirement with.
Yeah, and I think back to what you kind of started out with, Matt, you kind of asked the question of when does a business owner need to go through this? Well, to me, I almost want to say the earlier the better, because the next thing that we haven't really talked about is valuation. And another key team member, another key person that needs to be on your team is your financial advisor. So ultimately, most of the time, a person's goal with owning this business is to sell it and retire successfully, correctly. So what is the number that you need? And going through the program, we don't do a formal valuation, but you're going to figure out, we're going to help you. You'll have a pretty good idea what your company's worth. But the sad part that Steve and I see way too often is where a business owner has been telling their financial advisor that their company's worth, say, $10 million. And the financial advisor writes up a retirement plan as if this mythical $10 million check's going to come in. So fast forward to the age of 65, 70, they come to Steve and I, and we value the company. It's like, well, no, the company's really worth $5 million, and that's before taxes. Well, now it's just blown up in your face. So if you know this process and you know your numbers and you have a pretty good, whether you do a formal valuation or not, and you know what the value of that company is and a realistic value, that's going to help you determine, do I need to grow this thing, or, what path do I need to take to achieve my goal for retirement?
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. For my clients, I encourage them to start as early as possible as well. And some of that's too, because you don't necessarily know what's coming. You don't necessarily know when you're going to for sure want to sell your business. You might love what you do, and it's great if you love what you do, first of all. But it's about having options in life, and having a business should be, if anything, about being able to have more options. You might come to the point where you might want to take a shift in your life, and you can't predict that 2 or 3 years necessarily down the road for sure. Or maybe something happens, maybe there's a big event in your life and you want to be able to sell your business and get out of it. But if you wait until that endpoint that might be a retirement later on down the road to finally start putting your stuff together and putting your numbers together, well, first of all, most likely all these years you haven't been running your business very profitably. You've probably been missing out on a lot of money that could have been going towards retirement and actually building the value of the company. And you never really had an understanding of what it would take to build the value of the company. And so you've missed out on probably millions and millions of dollars over the course of the years. And then by the time you finally decide, okay, I'm ready for it, it's going to be at least another 2 or 3, maybe 5 years of prep and hard work of learning how to do all this stuff and finally putting it in place and hoping that you can make it work by the time that you finally want to get out of the business. And it's already too late. You're already behind the 8 ball at that point.
Well, and not only that, so we call it the ostrich syndrome. They stick their head in the sand and I don't want to talk about this stuff. Yeah. But a lot of times it's not even the financial viability of the company. Maybe I've got a company right now that should sell for over $5 million, and we're having a hard time finding a buyer because the owner is still a chief everything officer. And, buyers are coming because they to get that amount of value for the business, he's doing something right. But they're looking at it and going, I'm not moving to this town to run this business. There's no management team in place. So those non-financial things, I tell people all the time, it's not that they lower the value of your company, say from $1 million to $800,000. It's that they make the company completely unsellable. And it's very important. Yeah. And that's another thing to be thinking about as you're growing your business. Are you growing recurring revenue in the business? Are you separating yourself? Do you have a management team? Did you sign some kind of contract that ties you specifically to a supplier or a key employee or a key customer? All those skeletons come out of the closet when you put the for sale sign up.
Yeah. The other thing that's really interesting about this is there are things like coronaviruses that come and hit us too, right? So, there are external events that can have a big impact on your business. So, we always say, look, for the valuation, every business owner ought to know what the real fair market value of their business is. We're Americans. We keep score, right? That's what we do. And if you're a business owner, how do you know whether or not your business is better today than it was 2 years ago? Well, if you're valuing your business every year or every 2 years to understand where your number is, then it's easy for you to keep yourself accountable to, I want this thing to continue to go up year after year after year. And it's the owner's report card, right? It's them showing themselves how well they're doing. It's what it amounts to. Because nobody else is going to tell them until they get to the end of the road, like Terry said, and they may have found that they made a bunch of strategic decisions along the way that made their business totally unsellable, even though it produces profit.
That's the big part that a lot of people don't understand. Back to Terry's point in terms of, are you selling a job or are you selling an asset? It's really hard to sell a job. So if your business requires you to be there on a day-to-day basis and you don't have that management team, you don't have a strategic growth plan in place where even the business can grow and thrive without you having to be there as well, because it's one thing to manage it and to have it go, but it's another thing to actually to have the business where it'll continue to grow whether or not, go versus grow. What people need to understand is that how often do you tell people, hey, you know what, I've got a job for you. If you employ anybody, I've got a job for you. You just got to pay me $100,000 to work for me. That never happens. But it's the same thing when you're business, when you go to try to sell it and say, great, I've got this great business and it's going to require you to run it every day. So you're probably going to have to be working, 100 hours, just like me, to run it on a consistent basis. You're going to have to probably move, to my hometown to be able to do it. And really, I don't have a plan for how to continue to grow it. So you're going to have to come in here and kind of try to figure that out. And while you're doing that, you're going to have to get used to everybody in the business, and hope that nobody leaves in the process, because you're running it in a different fashion. It's just not really as realistic as people think. So at the end of the day, the best thing they can do is they can sell maybe a customer list and maybe some goodwill, but the business is going to be nowhere near as valuable as if it is an asset that continues to produce profits with or without them there. And that's really what that asset mentality is that business can continue to grow and be profitable whether or not you're there on a day-by-day basis.
You said it well. Nobody wants to buy a job, but everybody wants to buy a money machine that kicks out money every day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why people invest in the stock market, because they hope that they're going to put money in, they don't have to think about it, and they're going to get a return on it every year. Well, buying and selling businesses can be way more profitable, but again, people are only looking for businesses that, they're going to be able to take and
I would, it would be fun to have another call. It's just, it all starts with understanding the numbers. And I'm telling you, it's not that hard. We could take you through an easy process to teach you numbers. But then, it's probably a topic for another podcast is a financial acquisition versus a strategic acquisition, or a financial valuation versus a strategic acquisition. In my book, there's I talk about me and my accountant always butted heads, because he was like, Terry, you only pay for a company for the cash flow that it's producing. But from a strategic standpoint, I knew I'm going to eliminate about 40% of the expenses, operating expenses that the other company has. So from a strategic standpoint, it had a much higher value to me, although my accountant would encourage me to only pay for the current cash flow that it's spinning off. So, once you understand your numbers, and now if we're going to grow our business by acquisition, you can really come across some pretty lucrative deals in expanding your business. And the other thing nowadays, especially, is, you're buying a business, so you're not only increasing your sales, but oftentimes you're acquiring employees that can work to get you more out of the business. Because there's always that proverbial hump that you got to get over, right? Yeah, you're telling me don't work in my business. Well, shoot, I got to hire somebody to do this, and I don't have enough money to do it. So how do I get over that hump? And I was there, when I first came back to the business, I drove a truck every day, and but once it was done, I didn't. I had operations managers and office manager and stuff like that, but it ain't easy. So, but if you know the numbers, it's a lot easier than not knowing the numbers, and being able to predict if you're going to the bank and you got a bankable deal, being able to know what your numbers are and if they're going in the right direction. It's all very important.
Yeah. I mean, it even allows you to be able to communicate with your team. What does success even mean on a day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year basis? If it's just like, we increased revenue, but for some reason you're not able to give bonuses, or if people don't really necessarily know how their job even affects the overall revenue generation or profitability of the business, it really creates this disconnect, and people don't necessarily take as much responsibility for the tasks at hand. But if you can actually drill down and help people understand, like, this is what we need to do to win as a business, and this is how your job affects it, it again is game changing for the culture of the business as well. And for people who struggle with employees' productivity, well, a lot of times it's because they don't connect their job to the success of the business overall. Really, they don't necessarily feel how their role is necessarily affecting that mission with the clients. They don't necessarily understand how the overall bonus structure for all the employees and how all the employees are affected by their job, doing their job or not doing their job. So it's even another practice in great management and great leadership. But yeah, we're going to definitely have to do another podcast on this. We're going to have to get together again and talk about, really drive in more with these numbers and valuation and exit planning and even just how to manage it. So we'll do that another time. But I don't mind telling my audience, I want them to know that I really do believe in the CEO to CEO program. It is a program that I'm offering in partnership with Innovative Business Advisors, because I work with my clients on sales and marketing and leadership and employee engagement programs, as well as I was actually in the process of creating a whole new training of running your business by the numbers. And I came across, what Steve and Terry were doing with this program. And I was blown away with it. Normally I tell people this is the part where they kind of share how they can get a hold of them. But we're working together in this. So you can contact me directly, but also you can contact Terry and Steve and let them know that you heard it here on the podcast or on the video. That's where you found out about what they're doing and how they're really enabling business owners to demystify the banking relationships, demystify what it takes to build an exit plan, demystify what it takes just to know whether or not you're going to have enough money in the bank to be able to pay the bills. So Steve and Terry, please, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they can always go to our website at innovativeba.com. That's innovative, P as in Apple, A as in advisors.com. And there's a lot of information there, including all of our email information and so forth. So that's always a good way. And then Matt, if they want to learn more about the CEO to CEO program, I'd invite your listeners to contact you because you're a licensee of that product. And you can provide information for them there. But we'd love to have them in one of our upcoming classes. And it is a life-changing program. They make a commitment to stay with us for 20 sessions, and we guarantee it will change their life.
And if you go to the media tab on our website, there's a lot of useful information there, also with blogs and other podcasts we've done and articles we've written that have been published in magazines all over the place. A lot of stuff on cash flow and strategic and financial valuations and things like that. So wealth of information there. It's almost like a small library anymore.
And how do they get a hold of your book again?
So the name of the book is You Don't Know What You Don't Know. It is on Amazon, and the website is youdon'tknowwhatyoudon'tknow.com. You can download. There's questions at the end of each chapter, which was my aha moment in writing the book. When I wrote those questions, it was like, you know what? You don't answer these questions, you'll learn something. So you can download the questions for free. But a lot of good information on there also. It might give the book a nice little push. In 2019, it was listed by Forbes magazine as a top 10 business book.
Oh, wow. Well, and it's even more important and more critical now with the COVID-19 situation that's going on while we're recording this, and the potential recession or depression, or at least the economic disruption that's going to happen. We didn't even hit upon that. We'll have to hit upon that on the next in the next podcast, right? So please, take a chance, pick up a book, read it. I think that Terry's book's a fantastic book, and it's time. It's more important than ever to really understand the numbers of your business and make sure that you're operating as profitably as possible, since especially now, so many people are just trying to cut deals and try to slash off pricing. You can do that to the point of death for your business if you don't understand your gross profits, your net profits, your cash flow. So please be careful with that. Get some help. And again, my name is Matt Barbey. I'm the host of this show. I coach businesses and business owners on how to reach that freedom point in their business where the business can run without them having to be there on a daily basis. And if you have any questions regarding that or the CEO to CEO program, please feel free to reach out. 314-441-5423. Thank you.
Matt, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.